back here?
Yeah, there's a driveway from the townhomes that backs right up to our fence.
Now, would you think that's a female friend or a male friend?
Honestly, I'm not going to put anything by it right now.
The town of Frederick, Colorado, had the kind of quiet suburban charm where garage doors opened to neat driveways, kids played on cul-de-sacs, and neighbors waved from across manicured lawns. It wasn't the kind of place where people locked their doors at night until the morning of August 13th, 2018. Shanann Watts, a vibrant 34-year-old mother of two, was reported missing along with her daughters, Bella and Celeste. Friends described Shanann as a supermom, bubbly, hard-working, and deeply in love with her family. Her social media painted a picture of a perfect life, weekend getaways, matching outfits for her girls, and countless posts declaring her love for her husband, Chris Watts. A quiet, unassuming man. He worked in the oil industry, rarely spoke out of turn, and was described by many as the nice guy who kept to himself. Their love story seemed like a fairy tale. They met online, built a life from scratch, and were expecting their third child, a boy they had already named Nico. But behind closed doors, cracks were beginning to show. The night Shanann returned from a business trip to Arizona was supposed to be like any other. Her friend, Nicole Atkinson, dropped her off around 2 a.m. She never heard from her again. By morning, text messages went unanswered. Calls went to voicemail, and within hours, Nicole was at the Watts residence, banging on the door. No one answered. She called the police, and with that, the perfect facade began to crumble. Police arrived to find Shanann's car still in the garage. Her purse was inside, her medication, her phone, but no sign of Shanann or the girls. Chris arrived home not long after. Calm, too calm. He offered up an explanation. He said they'd had an emotional conversation, and he left for work early. Maybe she took the kids to a friend's place, maybe. But officers couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. And when the police body cam footage was released, the world agreed. Chris's behavior didn't match the urgency of a father whose family had vanished. He talked, he smiled, he texted, but he never cried. Behind the scenes, detectives were already digging. Phone records, surveillance footage, interviews with family and friends. And soon, a chilling picture began to emerge. Shanann's phone history showed tension, arguments, a marriage in decline, and then a name, Nicole Kessinger. Chris was having an affair, and not just a fling, a full-blown, passionate relationship that had begun just weeks earlier. Nicole believed Chris was separated. He told her the marriage was over. They talked about a future together, one without Shanann, Bella, or Celeste. It was motive, and it was damning. The police brought Chris in for questioning. Hours passed. He denied everything, until they offered him a lie detector test. He agreed. He failed, and suddenly the walls closed in. Chris asked to speak with his father. Inside that small interrogation room, he finally spoke the unthinkable. She hurt the kids, and I had to take her life. But no one believed him. The truth was darker, far darker. As the sun rose over the Colorado landscape the day after Chris's confession, investigators knew they had only scratched the surface. His story, that Shanann had killed the girls, and he, in turn, killed her in a rage, didn't add up. Shanann's friends, family, and even her obstetrician insisted it was impossible. She loved her children more than life itself. So what was the truth? The answer lay beneath the oil fields of Weld County. On August 16th, investigators searched a remote site owned by Chris's employer, Anadarko Petroleum. GPS data from his work truck led them there, the same area he had driven to just hours after his family was last seen. It was a desolate, wind-blown field with 2 large oil tanks and a sense of heavy silence. And then They found her. Shanann's body was discovered in a shallow grave. Nearby, submerged inside separate crude oil tanks, were the bodies of Bella and Celeste. The method and the cold calculation horrified the nation. Shanann had been strangled. The children had been smothered. Autopsies confirmed what everyone feared. Chris had murdered all three, and he had tried to dissolve the girls' bodies in oil. The motive? Prosecutors believed it was simple. He wanted to start a new life with his mistress, a clean slate, and his family didn't fit into that vision. But the question everyone still asked was, how could a father do this? The answer came in pieces. Text messages, deleted photos, hours of police interviews. In one text, Chris told Nickel, "My life is a mess right now." In another, she asked him if he'd filed for divorce yet. Nickel herself was shocked when the truth came out. In later interviews, she said, "If I had any idea that he was going to hurt anyone, I would have never been with him." The public wasn't so sure. Internet sleuths dissected her interviews. Was she lying? Was she involved? No charges were ever filed against her, but the stigma remained. Chris eventually pled guilty to 5 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of unlawful termination of a pregnancy, and 3 counts of tampering with a deceased human body. In exchange for his confession, prosecutors agreed not to seek the death penalty. On November 19, 2018, he was sentenced to 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole. The courtroom was silent as Shanann's family spoke, each word piercing like a blade. "May God have mercy on your soul," her father said. But it wasn't the end. Because even in prison, Chris had more to say. In a February 2019 prison interview, he revealed the full, chilling truth. How he had strangled Shanann in their bed while she pleaded for her life. How Bella walked in moments later and asked, "What's wrong with Mommy?" And how, even after murdering one child, he still went on to kill the other. It was the stuff of nightmares. And yet, millions watched every detail unfold, unable to look away. Behind the thick concrete walls of Dodge Correctional Institution in Waupun, Wisconsin, a man once seen as a loving father now lived in total isolation. Chris Watts, inmate 674-796, began serving 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole. It was a punishment that fit the horror of his crime. Yet it was not justice in the eyes of many. But while the world moved on, a more chilling story was just beginning. Because now that Chris was behind bars, he started talking. His words, calm and eerily matter-of-fact, offered a glimpse into a mind that had shocked the world. Why did he kill Shanann, his pregnant wife? Why did he smother his 2 daughters, Bella and Celeste? Was it rage, desperation, or something darker? To understand the man behind the monster, we must revisit his past. Chris Watts was born on May 16, 1985, in Spring Lake, North Carolina. A quiet boy, introverted, with a passion for cars and NASCAR. Teachers remembered him as obedient. Friends? They barely noticed him. He wasn't the center of attention. He blended into the background, polite, quiet, reliable, the kind of man who would never raise suspicion. When Chris met Shanann Watts, it was almost like opposites colliding. She was energetic, strong-willed, ambitious, the type to lead, to post about her life, to command a room. He was reserved, content to follow. They married in 2012, moved to Colorado, and built what looked like a dream life. 2 daughters, a house in the suburbs, and a 3rd child on the way. But the cracks were always there. By 2018, things were unraveling. Financial stress, marital tension. Chris, who had always been passive, began to change. He started working out, losing weight. He grew more distant, emotionally unavailable. And then came Nickel Kessinger, a co-worker at Anadarko Petroleum. Intelligent, attractive. She believed Chris was separated. He told her what she wanted to hear, that his marriage was over. They texted constantly, took trips together, and spoke of a future free of baggage. Chris wanted that new life. But instead of divorce, he chose murder. In February 2019, from behind bars, Chris gave a detailed confession to investigators from the FBI and Colorado Bureau of Investigation. In his words, "The night Shanann returned from a business trip, they fought. She confronted him about the affair, threatened to take the kids. He snapped. He straddled her as she lay in bed, strangled her. She fought back. Their unborn son, Nico, died with her. Then, as he wrapped Shanann in a bedsheet, their 4-year-old daughter Bella walked in. 'Is Mommy okay?' she asked. Chris lied. He loaded Shanann's body into the truck, along with Bella and Celeste, still alive, and drove nearly an hour to a remote oil field site. There he smothered Celeste with a blanket while Bella watched. Then Bella, his eldest, the one who had asked, 'What happened to Cece?' met the same fate. Autopsy reports showed she fought, bit her tongue. She died knowing. And Chris, he dumped Celeste's and Bella's bodies in separate oil tanks. He buried Shanann in a shallow grave nearby. He returned home, texted co-workers, smiled on doorbell footage, and went to work as if nothing had happened. When asked why, Chris had no real answer. "I felt like something else was in control," he said in his confession. Psychologists labeled him a covert narcissist, someone who suppresses emotion until it implodes. Others called him sociopathic, capable of detaching from empathy entirely. His parents insisted, "This isn't the boy we raised." But the world had seen the truth. In prison, Chris reportedly reads the Bible daily, writes letters to those who still sympathize with him, and keeps a low profile. He receives fan mail, disturbingly, many from women, and rarely speaks to anyone but investigators. But he does speak, and every time, new details emerge, each more disturbing than the last. In the days following the Watts family tragedy, investigators turned their attention to an increasingly crucial source of evidence: the digital footprints left behind. In an age where every click, swipe, and search leaves a mark, Chris Watts' online behavior began to unravel the deeper layers of his twisted double life. They started with his phone. When forensic experts accessed Chris's smartphone, they unearthed a timeline of deceit. His call logs, browser history, and text messages painted a portrait of a man spiraling into detachment. Long before Shanann and the girls vanished, Chris's digital world had begun to split from his physical one. Just weeks before the murders, Chris had searched for things that now seemed chilling in hindsight. How to prepare for a new life, divorce without custody, and fitness-related topics that aligned with his changing physique. His self-centered online activity mirrored his transformation, both physical and emotional, as he carved out a space where his family didn't exist. Then came the more damning searches. Investigators found entries related to dating apps, how to delete messages permanently, and even inquiries into the depth of oil tanks, the same kind his daughters would be found in. It was premeditation in pixels. Shanann, ever active on social media and via text, had confided in friends about Chris's strange behavior. Her messages told the story of a woman trying desperately to salvage her marriage. In one message to her friend, she wrote, "Chris has changed. He's cold, distant, not the man I married. I don't recognize him anymore." She voiced her suspicions about an affair, the emotional absence, and his bizarre reactions to her attempts at intimacy. Despite this, Shanann continued to plan their future, hopeful that the man she loved would come back to her. But Chris's replies, often short, dismissive, or completely absent, said otherwise. Nicole Kessinger's digital presence was also pulled into the investigation. Her phone revealed hundreds of texts between her and Chris, starting innocently in June 2018 and growing more intimate with each day. Chris painted a false narrative of his marriage. He told Nicole it was ending, that Shanann had become controlling, that he was sleeping in the basement. and Nickel, by her later admission, believed him. She Googled Amber Frey, the woman who turned on Scott Peterson during his murder trial, and read articles about mistresses linked to high-profile crimes. Was it paranoia or foreshadowing? Nickel later told investigators, "I was trying to figure out who I was dealing with. I was scared." Even the messages Chris thought were erased came back to haunt him. Forensic recovery tools pulled deleted texts, call records, and metadata that reconstructed his secret timeline. Every lie he told to Shanann, to Nickel, and to the police. The timestamps betrayed him. Investigators were able to match Chris's version of events with GPS data, showing his actual movements. The morning of the murders, his truck's route to the oil site aligned perfectly with the time Shanann and the girls stopped responding. CCTV from neighbors' homes showed Chris backing his truck into the garage, something he never did, under the cover of early morning darkness. Police believe it was then that he loaded the bodies into his vehicle. Shanann's social media accounts told their own version of reality, filtered, bright, and brimming with love. But even there, subtle cracks had begun to show. Friends noticed fewer pictures of Chris. He seemed absent in the online scrapbook of her life. Her last post before she vanished was a photo of her ultrasound, baby Nico. Underneath it, Chris commented with a single heart emoji. It was a chilling contrast, the illusion of support and happiness, while harboring deadly intent. Perhaps the most haunting finds were on the iPad Bella used. Child games, innocent videos, and recorded songs. These remnants of normalcy stood in heartbreaking contrast to their fate. Investigators also found a chilling voice memo recorded by Shanann just weeks before her death. In it, she described feeling alone, unwanted, and uncertain. "I'm doing everything I can to save this family, but I can't be the only one fighting." By the time the world heard the name Chris Watts, the story had already burrowed its way into the darkest corners of the American psyche. The bodies had been found. The confession had been made. But the public demanded more: answers, justice, and a reckoning. And so began one of the most chilling pretrial spectacles in recent memory. Chris Watts, now a household name for all the wrong reasons, entered the Weld County Courthouse for arraignment in an orange jumpsuit, shackled at the waist. The room was tense, not just with grief, but with fury. Media crews camped outside the courthouse. Protesters held signs that read, "Justice for Shanann," "Bella Cece deserved better," and simply, "Monster." But there would be no televised courtroom drama, because Chris Watts chose to take a different route, one that stunned many. He pled guilty. On November 6, 2018, with the blessing of Shanann's family, Chris accepted a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. He was charged with 5 counts of first-degree murder, one for each of his family members and an additional count for each of his daughters, being under 12 and killed by someone in a position of trust. He also faced charges for unlawful termination of a pregnancy and for tampering with the bodies. The courtroom was heavy with silence as Judge Marcelo Kopkow read the charges. Chris stood expressionless. Shanann's family sat in the gallery, their faces a portrait of heartbreak. The plea deal avoided what could have been a years-long trial, sparing Shanann's parents and friends the trauma of having to relive the gruesome details. But it also meant the public wouldn't get the trial they expected. No fiery prosecution, no dramatic defense, no surprise witnesses. Still, there were revelations. On November 19, 2018, during the sentencing hearing, Weld County District Attorney Michael Rourke laid out the evidence in excruciating detail. The court heard how Shanann's body had been transported in the footwell of Chris's truck, how Bella had begged for her life, and how coldly Chris had disposed of the bodies. Perhaps the most haunting detail was a moment recorded by the truck's GPS system, a pause at a stop sign for over a minute. Prosecutors speculated that during that pause, Chris was debating whether to go through with it or turn back. He chose the former. Shanann's parents, Frank and Sandra Rzucek, gave emotional statements. Frank spoke through tears, Remembering his daughter's compassion and his granddaughter's smiles, Sandra turned to Chris and said, "I trusted you. I believed you were the one person who would protect them. You betrayed that trust." Then came the sentence. 5 life sentences, 3 to be served consecutively, no chance for parole, plus 48 years for unlawful termination of a pregnancy, and another 36 years for tampering with the bodies. Chris Watts would never walk free again. But closure remained elusive, because as Chris was led away, the world was still asking, why? Why not divorce? Why not walk away? The answer may never satisfy. Chris himself has vacillated between explanations, from "I was scared" to "I was possessed" to "I wanted a new life." None of it made sense. None of it justified the horror. As the courtroom emptied, one thing was clear. The trial was over, but the story was not. The ripples continued far beyond Frederick, Colorado. The Watts case sparked national conversations about domestic violence, covert narcissism, and the dangers of performative social media. It forced families to question how well they really knew the people in their lives. It reignited debates around the death penalty, and it left behind a digital graveyard, hours of bodycam footage, interrogation tapes, Facebook posts, and court documents, a morbid archive for anyone brave enough to look. When the gavel dropped on November 19, 2018, sentencing Chris Watts to 5 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole, the legal chapter of the Watts family tragedy was closed. But for Shanann's family, and for millions following the case, it was far from over. The emotional wreckage in the aftermath of the murders was immense, and the fallout would ripple across relationships, communities, and the very culture of true crime obsession. In North Carolina, Shanann's parents, Frank and Sandy Razuchek, tried to grieve while thrust into a harsh public spotlight. What should have been a private mourning became a media storm. Press vans camped outside their home. Interview requests flooded in. Everyone wanted a quote. Everyone wanted a reaction. But all Frank and Sandy wanted was their daughter and granddaughters back. "I wake up every day, and I have to remind myself they're gone," Frank said tearfully during one interview. "We go through the motions, but our hearts are not in it. The court may have delivered justice, but peace? That was harder to come by." Online, the Watts case took on a life of its own. True crime forums exploded with theories, debates, and accusations. Countless YouTube channels analyzed bodycam footage frame by frame. Facebook groups dedicated to the case numbered in the tens of thousands. People were obsessed with Chris, with Shanann, with Nicole Kessinger. Some sympathized with Chris, disturbingly seeing him as a man trapped in an unhappy marriage. Others cast suspicion on Nicole, despite her full cooperation with police and no evidence of wrongdoing. Then there were those who turned on Shanann herself, accusing her of being controlling, even blaming her for her own death. Sandy Razuchek eventually spoke out against the abuse. In a heartbreaking public letter, she wrote, "We lost our entire family, and now we have to endure strangers picking apart our daughter's life, fabricating lies, and attacking her character. It's cruel beyond measure." But the internet wasn't the only battlefield. Inside prison walls, Chris's life took a strange turn. He became something of a true crime celebrity. He received hundreds of letters from admirers, some of them romantic. Women offered to marry him. Some even got tattoos of his name. To investigators, it was baffling. "There's a sickness to it," said one former FBI profiler. "Some people are drawn to danger, to the idea they can fix the unfixable." Chris himself remained mostly quiet. Occasionally, he wrote back. Often, he quoted the Bible. He told one pen pal he had found God and was seeking forgiveness. To another, he wrote that he had dreams of his daughters, dreams where they were alive, where they asked him why. He claimed to feel remorse, but whether it was genuine was anyone's guess. Meanwhile, new lawsuits emerged. The Ruchek family filed a wrongful death suit against Chris, effectively ensuring he would never profit from the murders. They also took legal action against those spreading defamatory conspiracy theories about Shanann. "We won't let her memory be destroyed," Sandy vowed. "She was a beautiful person, a loving mother." That's the truth. In Weld County, prosecutors admitted the case had left scars on their team as well. Several investigators sought counseling. Some couldn't sleep. Others confessed they still saw Bella and Celeste in their dreams. "We deal with murder all the time," one officer said, "but this one stayed with us." The tragedy also ignited debates about domestic violence and the warning signs that go unnoticed. Advocacy groups used the case to push for more education on emotional abuse and coercive control. Shanann's story became a cautionary tale, not of what she did wrong, but of what can happen when one partner sees another not as a human being, but as an obstacle. Even now, years later, the home on Saratoga Trail stands as a haunting landmark. It's still there in Frederick, Colorado, unsold, uninhabited, and frozen in time. Some neighbors avoid walking by it. Others say they hear strange noises at night. Whether haunted by ghosts or just memory, the house holds a silence too loud to ignore. For Shanann's surviving family, life moves on, but differently. Every birthday, every holiday is marked by absence. They started a foundation in Shanann's name to support domestic violence survivors. Her father now speaks at events, urging people to recognize the signs, to check on friends, to never assume everything is okay just because it looks that way online.